Before we begin, I invite you to take a moment, just breathe, feel your body sitting, feel the air gently entering and leaving. The mind, like a wild horse, often runs toward the future, fearing what might happen, fearing the unknown, fearing mistakes, fearing failure. But what is failure? Let us reflect together. Many people are frozen not by real obstacles, but by the idea of failing, the image of falling short, the judgment of others, the disappointment of not living up to expectations, their own or those of the world. But have you ever asked yourself, who defined those expectations, and more importantly, why do you hold on to them so tightly? In the teachings of the temple, we are reminded again and again, nature does not rush. The seed does not fear the soil. The mountain does not fear erosion. It simply exists and continues to evolve. So then, why are you afraid to fall? The fear of failure is not rooted in the event itself. It is rooted in attachment to outcome, to reputation, to identity. When we cling to these things, we begin to measure ourselves not by our effort or our growth, but by results, and this is where the suffering begins. To overcome this fear is not to force confidence. It is to become aware, to see clearly. What are you really afraid of? And is that fear true or simply a shadow created by your mind? When a martial artist falls, he does not curse the ground. He bows to it, because falling is part of learning. In the same way, your failures are not punishments. They are invitations to begin again, but this time wiser, stronger, more aligned. So today, I will not tell you to be fearless. That is not necessary. What is necessary is for you to walk anyway, to feel the fear but not feed it, to take a step forward even when the outcome is uncertain, and to remember that failure too is a teacher, perhaps the most honest one. To overcome the fear of failure, the first and most essential step is understanding its nature. Fear, like any other emotion, arises within you, not outside. What many call fear of failure is, in truth, a collection of thoughts, projections, and assumptions created by the mind. It is not the fall itself that people fear, but the story they tell themselves about what that fall will mean. This fear is rooted in attachment to identity, to reputation, to perfection, to the illusion of control. But the truth is, none of these attachments can bring you inner freedom. On the contrary, they are the very chains that keep you from moving forward. Observe the mind carefully. When you consider starting something new, pursuing a dream, or making a bold decision, what comes first? Excitement or hesitation? Often the hesitation arrives disguised as logic. It says, what if I fail? What will people say? What if I am not enough? These questions sound reasonable, but in reality they are subtle forms of self-doubt. They are the expressions of a mind conditioned to avoid risk, discomfort, and uncertainty. But growth does not occur inside comfort. Just as the muscles of the body grow only when exposed to resistance, the strength of the spirit develops only when it is challenged by fear, especially the fear of failure. There is a practice in the monastery standing still in a horse stance for long periods of time. To an outsider, this may look like nothing is happening, but internally there is a battle. The legs begin to shake, the mind begins to protest, and discomfort increases. And yet, the teaching is not to fight the pain, but to observe it. Not to escape the discomfort, but to breathe through it. Why? Because the ability to stay centered in discomfort is the very key to overcoming fear. The same principle applies to fear of failure. When you try to fight or suppress this fear, it grows. But when you become still and present with it, it loses power. It cannot survive in the light of awareness. You must also recognize that failure is not personal. It is not a reflection of your worth. It is simply feedback, a natural part of the learning process. When a child learns to walk, they fall again and again. Yet no one calls that child a failure. Why? Because we understand instinctively that falling is necessary for walking. But somewhere along the way, we lose this wisdom. We become afraid to fall. Not because the fall is painful, but because we associate it with shame, with judgment, with rejection. These are not real consequences. They are imagined, and they can be dismantled. The ego is deeply invested in success. It wants to be admired, praised, validated, but the path of mastery in any art, craft, or life itself is not paved with success alone. It is carved by repeated failures. Each misstep is a chisel, each setback is a sharpening stone. The ego resists this because it fears being exposed. But your growth requires that you be willing to be seen not only in your strength, but also in your vulnerability. When a student first enters the temple, he does not know how to punch, kick, or meditate. He is clumsy, unfocused, and uncertain, but his task is not to be perfect. His task is to return each day, despite the previous day's struggle. It is this act of showing up again and again that dissolves fear, because through experience the student realizes falling does not kill you, mistakes do not define you, the process itself becomes the teacher. In your life, you must allow yourself to begin again. Whether in your relationships, your work, or your personal journey, you must be willing to take the first step, even when the entire staircase is not visible. Do not wait for fear to disappear. It will not. But if you stop feeding it with attention, if you stop believing every doubtful thought it produces, you will begin to move, and that movement is freedom. When you take action despite fear, you build trust not in the outcome, but in yourself. That trust is what liberates you from the fear of failure, because you no longer measure your life by what you achieve, but by how deeply and courageously you live. One of the greatest misunderstandings about failure is the belief that it defines who we are. This belief is deeply rooted in our culture, where performance is praised and imperfection is often hidden. But in the tradition of self-mastery, the focus is not on achievement, it is on understanding. When you begin to see failure not as a destination, but as part of the path, your relationship with it changes completely. The fear begins to dissolve the moment you stop identifying yourself with the outcome and start identifying yourself with the effort, the process, and the discipline of showing up. There is a story told in many teachings of a master who handed his student a cup and said, "Fill it with water until it breaks." The student, confused, began pouring. With each attempt, the cup overflowed or cracked. Yet the master insisted again. After many trials, the student finally asked, "Why do you want me to keep breaking the cup?" The master replied, "Because it's not the cup I want to see, it's how you respond when it breaks." This story is not about failure. It's about resilience, about the attitude we carry when things don't go as planned. The moment you stop fearing the break, you begin to gain the strength to rebuild. In the internal martial arts, practitioners are taught to flow with the force, not resist it. When an opponent strikes, the goal is not to block with brute force, but to redirect, absorb, and transform the energy. The same principle can be applied to life. Failure is not something to resist. It is something to flow with, to learn from, to grow through. If you meet failure with rigidity, you will break. If you meet it with flexibility, you will adapt, and adaptation is strength in motion. The fear of failure often comes from the belief that you are alone in your struggle, that others succeed easily while you struggle in silence, but this is a distortion. Every person who has achieved anything meaningful has failed many times. The only difference is that they did not stop. They used failure as fuel. What most people call success is simply the visible tip of an iceberg. Below it lie countless invisible attempts, rejections, doubts, and setbacks. You must remind yourself that you are not behind. You are simply building the part of the iceberg that no one sees. Another source of fear comes from comparison. When you look at others and measure your progress against theirs, you forget that every journey is unique. The tree does not compare itself to the flower. The moon does not envy the sun. Each has its own rhythm. Likewise, your life is unfolding in its own time. There is no need to rush, no need to chase. What matters is not how fast you go, but how present you are with your path. Comparison creates anxiety. Presence dissolves it. To truly overcome the fear of failure, You must begin to cultivate a new inner dialogue, one rooted not in judgment, but in compassion. When you fail, ask yourself not, "Why did I mess up?" but "What is this trying to teach me?" This shift in language is powerful. It transforms failure from something shameful into something sacred, into something that guides you deeper into understanding, into awareness, into clarity. This kind of self-inquiry brings strength that cannot be taken away, because it is not built on outcomes, it is built on wisdom. Lastly, discipline must be practiced, not the harsh discipline of punishment, but the steady discipline of returning. The fear of failure loses its grip when you become someone who returns to your breath, to your values, to your intention. Even when the mind doubts, even when the world judges, you return. This act, simple as it may seem, is an act of power. Because in that return you reclaim your authority, not over the world, but over yourself, and that is where true freedom begins. Overcoming the fear of failure lies in shifting your focus from outcome to presence. Fear often arises when we attach ourselves too tightly to a specific result, a promotion, a certain amount of money, recognition, approval. These attachments build a mental structure of expectations, and the mind begins to obsess over whether reality will match the image it has created. When that image is threatened, anxiety takes hold. But the truth is, outcomes are never fully in our control. Life moves with too many variables, too many unseen forces. To make your sense of peace dependent on what you cannot control is to live in constant unease. Presence, on the other hand, is always available. It is not concerned with success or failure. It is concerned only with this moment, this breath, this step, this task. When you are present, you do not worry about how your effort will be judged. You simply give your best, without inner resistance, without hesitation. The paradox is that when you act from this state of presence, the quality of your actions improves. You become more focused, more attuned, more clear. And as a result, outcomes tend to improve as well, not because you chased them, but because you showed up fully. In the Shaolin teachings, the emphasis is always on the practice, not on the performance. A student does not train for applause. He trains for discipline, for mastery, for alignment. When he punches, he does not think of the fight. He thinks of the punch, how it flows from the breath, how the spine is aligned, how the intention carries through the movement. That attention to detail, to the present action, is what makes the practice powerful. It is what transforms fear into flow. Fear cannot survive when the mind is still. It feeds on projections on what might happen, what could go wrong. But when you bring your awareness to what is happening, that fear has nothing to hold on to. It begins to dissolve like a mist in the morning sun. The challenge, of course, is that the mind does not like to stay in the present. It is always seeking, always jumping ahead, always judging. This is why presence must be trained. It is a muscle that grows stronger through repetition. One way to cultivate this presence is to focus on your breath. In moments of doubt or fear, return to your breath, not to escape the situation, but to anchor yourself in it. Feel the air entering and leaving your body. Let it remind you, you are alive, you are here, you are capable. This grounding gives you the clarity to act, not from panic, but from poise. Another way is to focus on small, deliberate actions. When the mind is overwhelmed by the fear of failure, it is often because it is trying to control the entire journey at once. But you only need to take the next step. You do not need to have all the answers. You do not need to see the entire path. You only need to ask yourself, what is the most mindful step I can take right now? And then take it. The path reveals itself in motion, not in hesitation. Letting go of the obsession with results also opens you to deeper learning. When you are not trying to prove something, you become curious. You begin to ask questions, to explore possibilities, to discover insights you would have missed if your attention had been fixed on achievement. In this state of openness, failure becomes feedback. It becomes a mirror showing you what works and what doesn't. It helps you adjust, refine, evolve. Presence also teaches humility. It reminds you that you are a participant in life, not its master, that you can influence but not control, that you can give your best but must release the rest. And in doing so, you experience a sense of peace, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with imperfection. Overcoming the fear of failure is the cultivation of inner strength through self-knowledge. Many people try to conquer their fears by seeking more strategies, external motivation, or by mimicking others who appear fearless. But without understanding who you truly are and where your fear arises from, these efforts become superficial and temporary. The mind may be temporarily convinced, but the fear lingers in the heart. True freedom from fear begins with self-awareness. It begins when you stop running from yourself and start turning inward to meet the parts of you that are afraid, uncertain, and vulnerable. In the temple, one of the first lessons is not about movement, it is about silence. The students are taught to sit in stillness and observe their breath, their thoughts, their emotions. At first, this seems simple, even easy. But as time passes, discomfort arises, thoughts begin to surface, regrets, insecurities, doubts, judgments. Many students think this is a sign that something is wrong, but the master explains, this is the practice. To sit with yourself without distraction, without running, and to truly meet what is within you. Because only when you face what is inside can you understand what holds you back. The fear of failure often comes from a fragmented sense of self. A part of you wants to grow, to expand, to try. Another part of you holds back, afraid of rejection, of embarrassment, of loss. These conflicting parts create inner tension, and when that tension is not addressed, it becomes fear not just of failure, but of yourself. You begin to fear your own desires, your own impulses, your own potential. You become trapped in your own mind, afraid to move forward, yet unsatisfied with staying still. To heal this fragmentation, you must begin to listen deeply to yourself. You must ask, where does this fear come from? Is it from a past experience where I was judged or misunderstood? Is it from a belief I've carried for years that I'm not good enough, smart enough, worthy enough? Most people live their entire lives without questioning these internal narratives. They accept them as truth, even though they were formed in moments of pain, confusion, or immaturity. But when you bring awareness to these beliefs, when you question them with compassion, they begin to loosen. You realize that fear is not who you are, it is a response, a habit, a story, and stories can be rewritten. Self-knowledge also means recognizing your unique path. Not everyone is meant to walk the same road. Some are called to lead, others to serve. Some move fast, others move slowly. There is no single definition of success. But if you do not know yourself, you will constantly try to fit into someone else's mold. And when you fail to meet those expectations, fear will grow. You will think something is wrong with you. But the truth is, there is nothing wrong, you are simply disconnected from your own truth. The more you align with who you truly are, your values, your rhythms, your inner compass, the less power fear has over you. Inner strength does not come from pretending to be fearless. It comes from knowing that even with fear, you can move. Even with doubt, you can act. Even with past failures, you can begin again. This kind of strength is quiet, not loud. It is steady, not flashy. It does not seek approval because it is rooted in authenticity. It comes from a deep knowing that your worth is not defined by your success, but by your willingness to stay true to yourself in every moment. Another part of self-knowledge is learning to manage your inner voice. Everyone has an inner critic, the voice that says, "You're not ready, you'll mess it up, who do you think you are?" This voice is not the enemy, it is simply a part of you that wants to protect you from pain. But protection is not the same as truth. You can acknowledge this voice without obeying it. You can say, "I hear you, but I will move anyway." Over time, as you take action in spite of fear, this voice begins to soften. It begins to trust you, because you are proving, through experience, that you can handle discomfort, that you can recover from setbacks, that you can walk even with trembling steps. Developing self knowledge also means learning how to recharge, how to rest, how to stay balanced. Many people fear failure because they are already exhausted. They push themselves constantly, driven by the belief that rest is weakness or laziness. But in the teachings of nature, we see that everything has a rhythm. The ocean has tides, the moon has phases, the body has cycles. When you honor these rhythms, you become more resilient. When you ignore them, you become brittle, and brittle things break more easily under pressure. Self-knowledge is not a destination. It is a lifelong journey of observing, listening, adjusting, and aligning. The more you know yourself, the less you fear failure. Because you no longer see failure as an attack on your identity, you see it as a moment, a message, a mirror. And with each step of self-awareness, you grow stronger, clearer, and more rooted in who you truly are. So now, as we come to the end of this reflection, understand the fear of failure is not something you eliminate once and for all. It is something you grow through, over and over again, with each challenge life presents. It loses its grip not by force, but by awareness. It fades not because you become invincible, but because you become willing to fall, willing to rise, and most importantly, willing to face yourself with honesty. You have learned that fear is not a sign of weakness, but an invitation to awaken. That your identity is not defined by your setbacks, but by your courage to keep walking. That presence is more powerful than perfection. And that true strength is not loud or boastful, it is silent, it is steady, and it is rooted in self-knowledge. When you choose to act despite fear, you are no longer controlled by it. When you choose to stay present in the process rather than obsess over the outcome, you regain your power. And when you choose to walk in alignment with who you are, not who the world expects you to be, then even failure becomes part of your freedom. This is the path, not of avoiding failure, but of embracing life fully with open eyes, open heart, and an unwavering spirit. Keep walking, keep showing up, keep returning to the truth within you, and let that truth guide you through every fall and every rise.